In this video, we will learn all about Webpack. So Webpack is a module bundler. Whenever you're working on actual industry projects, each project has a test environment, production environment, UAT environment, and so on. So we can't use Create React App for it as it's very heavy and it increases the bundle size of your application. Using Webpack allows us to separate out data, environment variables, and configuration for each environment without the need of changing the codebase. Using Webpack also allows us to use latest ES6 features like import and export syntax, which you can't use without bundler like Webpack. If you have used Create React App before, you might know that it internally uses Webpack so you don't have to configure anything. In this video, we will see how to do that configuration ourselves so we install only the packages we need and configure it for different environment. You will also see how to optimize your application for production and also steps to deploy it to production. As every React developer must know how to configure Webpack from scratch, as it's also a popular interview question. So let's get started with learning Webpack. We will first see what happens when we use import and export syntax without any Webpack configuration. So I have an empty folder with the name Webpack tutorial where we will create a public folder. And inside that, I will create an index.html file. Now, let me create index.js file also with simple console log statement. I will also create script.js file with one more console log statement. Now, inside the index.js file, I will import the test file. Import./script. The .js extension is optional, so you don't need to specify it. Now, in index.html file, I will load the index.js file using script tag. Let me run the HTML file using live server, and let's see what comes in browser console. As you can see, we're getting error, cannot use import statement outside the module. So when we use ES6 import syntax, it's not going to work in HTML file without any bundler. Let me delete those extra files we created. And we will install and use Webpack. Before installing anything, we first need to initialize a package.json file using npm init-y command. This will create a basic package.json file as you can see here. Now, let's install the required packages using npm install webpack and webpack-cli. Once it's installed, we need to create a new file in the root of our project with name webpack.config.js. The name has to match exactly so Webpack will work correctly. This file will be considered as Node.js file, so instead of ES6 export syntax, we will be using module.export syntax, which is Node.js way of exporting data from the file. And as a first configuration, we need to specify entry property which indicates the main file from where application starts. So we can create index.js file inside the src folder to indicate main file of our application. So for the path, we will specify ./src and index.js. And now we need to specify the name and location of file where the generated output will be stored using output property. So, inside the output object, we need to use filename property, and for value we can say bundle.js. And we also need to specify the location of the folder where that file will be created using path property, in our case it's public folder. To find out the exact path of the folder, we can use the Node.js path module which made available by Node.js itself. Now, we can use path.join and __dir name which gives the directory of the current file. And we will add public to that path. Now, we have created a basic Webpack configuration. Let's add a build script in the package.json file so we can run it. And here, I will just say, Webpack. Now, if I execute npm run build script, you can see Webpack command is executed and inside the public folder, bundle.js file is created. Right now, we only have console.log in index.js file, so bundle.js also contains the same output. You can also see a warning in the console telling missing mode in the configuration. So as we're running in development mode, we need to explicitly specify it in the Webpack config file. Now, if we execute the command again, we will not get any warning. And also bundle.js gets created from the index.js file. Now, let's try that import file statement to check if it works. So I will create a test.js file with a console log statement, and in the index.js file I will import that file. Now, let's run the build command again. You can see bundle.js file created from index.js and test.js file. And if you open bundle.js file, you can see it contains a lot of code. This code is added by Webpack to support the import syntax. Now, we need to include this generated bundle.js file in the index.html file so we can render it. So let's include that using a script tag. Now, if we check it in the browser, you can see there is no import error now and the content of test.js and index.js is correctly getting displayed. So console.log from test.js file is printed first as we're importing it first, and then the index.js file log is printed. Now, if I add some extra text in the console log statement and check in the browser, you can see it's not getting displayed. That's because we again need to run the build script so it will update that bundle.js file with the new change. So instead of manually rerunning that script, we can add a ---- watch flag to the build command so it will automatically update the bundle.js file. Now, you can see the build command is waiting for the change, and if we make any change, it will update the bundle file. So let's change the text again and verify that. You can see it has generated the bundle file again, and it's updated in the browser also. So this is how you can create basic Webpack configuration and render the content. Now, let's add React code to this application. Before that, let's install React and React DOM packages. Now, in index.js file, we can use React and React DOM package. Import React DOM from React DOM/client. We're importing from React DOM/client because we're using version 18 of React and React DOM. Now, let's create application root where we will add our React code using createRoot method. And for the container, we need to create a div with id root inside the index.html file. Now let's pass it as a container. Now, we can render some content on the screen using render method. Let's build the application again using npm run build command. As you can see, we're getting error saying we need an appropriate loader to display the content. Because we're using JSX syntax for the render method and Webpack don't have any idea how to render the JSX. But instead of JSX, we can use React.createElement method. So let me write the same JSX using createElement method. Because every JSX is finally converted to React.createElement call to get it rendered to the screen. Now, as you can see, it's compiled successfully without any error. And it's also rendered on the screen correctly. Now, let's update the displayed text. You can see it's displayed correctly on the screen. But we can't write code using React.createElement because it will become complicated once the code increases, so we always use JSX syntax. To handle the JSX syntax correctly, we need to use Babel.js, which compiles your React or ES6 plus code to ES5 code. Babel.js is a JavaScript compiler which all the frameworks and libraries uses behind the scenes to handle the ES6 plus code. So to use it, we first need to install the Babelcore npm package as a dev dependency using ---- save dev flag. When we don't use any package directly in our code, it should be installed as a dev dependency. Now, let's uncomment the JSX code and rerun the build. As you can see, we're getting the same error saying appropriate loader is needed. So to install the loader, you can search for npm babel-loader. If you want to find any npm package, just add npm text before the package name. As you can see, it's a very popular npm package. So let's install this package using npm install babel-loader command. Now, we need to instruct Webpack to use that loader for converting React and ES6 plus code to ES5 code which all browsers understand. So let's add configuration for that. We need to use the module property, and inside that, we need to add rules array by specifying the rule. Each rule will be an object. Here, I will use a test property to add a regular expression to match all files that ends with .js extension. So I want to run this loader for all .js files excluding the JS files from the node_modules folder. So I will add an exclude property also. And we also want to specify the name of the loader to use using loader property. Now, let's run the build again. You can see, we're getting some different error now. We're getting this error because by default Babel loader does not have any functionality. We need to add external plugins and presets to tell him what to do. So we need to install React and env presets using npm install at babel/preset env and at babel/preset react. Preset React is required to convert JSX code to ES5 code. And Preset env is to convert ES6 plus code to ES5 code. So if you go to Babel's website and click on Try It Out, you will see there are two presets already added, React and Stage 2. If we write JSX code here, we get the ES5 converted code on the right side. But if we remove the React preset, you can see we're getting an error because without the React preset Babel does not understand how to convert the code. So React preset is for JSX code and stage 2 is for ES6 Plus code. Instead of stage 2, we're using env preset, which supports all the ES6 Plus available features, as well as whatever will get released in future. So to specify these presets to be used by the Babel loader, we need to create .babelrc file. Here, for the presets property, we need to provide all the required presets as an array. Make sure to create .babelrc file in the root of the project and not inside any folder to work it correctly. Now, if we run build command, we should not get any error. You can see, it's successful. And if we check in the browser, you can see, Hello World is correctly rendered on the screen. Let's change something to see it reflected on the screen. You can see, it's working fine. Now, let's say, I have a CSS file index.css and some CSS code inside it. And I will import this CSS file and index file. Let me first remove the unnecessary files and code. And here, I will import ./index.css. Now, if I save the file, you can see we need another loader to handle the CSS files. So to fix this error, we will install two loaders, CSS loader and style loader. It needs to be installed as dev dependency. So all loaders and presets need to be installed a dev dependency as we're not directly using them in the code. So let me uninstall them from dependency and install it as dev dependency. As you know now, just installing loaders is not enough. We also need to tell Webpack to use those loaders. CSS loader is used to parse the CSS code, and style loader is required to inject the final CSS into the style tag in the HTML file. Now in the Webpack config file, we need to add another rule. So for all the files which ends with .css extension, we need to use these loaders. Now, we have two loaders, so instead of using loader property, we will use property and specify the loaders in an array. So whenever we create any .css file, these loaders will be used, and the order is important here. The loaders will be executed from right to left, so the CSS loader will first parse the CSS, and then style loader will load the CSS into HTML file. Now, if we run the build script again, we will not get any error. And as you can see, the CSS is also correctly getting applied. If I change the background color, we should see it reflected on the UI. This is how we can use CSS Loader and Style Loader to load the CSS files. If you check the head of the HTML content, you should see the style tag with all our CSS added. So the job of Style Loader is to add this style in the HTML file. If you check the bundle.js file, you should get that CSS present in the file. So right now, CSS is also added in JS file. We will see how to separate it out soon in the optimization section of this video. Now, let's say instead of CSS we're using Sass with SCSS syntax. We're getting error now because Webpack don't know how to work with SCSS files. So for that, we need to install Sass Loader. You might think you need to install a lot of packages for Webpack, so should skip Webpack. But you should not do that. Using Webpack, you install only those packages which are needed, so your application bundle size decreases, thereby improving performance of your application. That's why Webpack is popular and preferred in actual industry projects. So let's install Sass Loader as a dev dependency. And in Webpack configuration, we need to add Sass Loader here as a last loader. Now, Sass Loader will be executed first, then CSS Loader, and then Style Loader. We also need to change the test condition to use their loaders on any file which ends with either CSS or SCSS extension. So when we add a question mark before the S, it means S is optional, so file can be .scss or .css. Now, let's change the import from index.js file also to use the .scss file. Now, if we run the build again, we should get another error. The error is saying, cannot find module Sass. So to use the SCSS file with its syntax, we normally use node Sass npm package. But node Sass npm package is deprecated 2 years ago and it's not recommended anymore. Instead, Sass npm package is recommended to use. So we will install Sass npm package instead of node Sass. So even if you're using Create React App or Vue.js for SCSS files, you need to install the Sass npm package. Now, let's install the Sass npm package using npm install command. Sass Loader internally uses Sass, so we don't need to add any configuration for that. Now, if we run the build script again, we should not get any error. Also, UI is correctly getting displayed. However, we're not using any SCSS syntax yet. So let's use nested selectors syntax to see if it works. So we have created an app component with h1 tag and we have also added CSS for that. Now, let's render the app component instead of Hello World text. You can see, Welcome to React text is displayed in red color. And our CSS is also applied correctly. One thing you might have noticed is that we're using version 18 of React and still we're using import React syntax. As you might know, starting with version 17 of React, importing React package is no longer required to use the JSX syntax. Now, after removing those imports, let's rerun the build script and see what happens. Here, we're not getting any error. Let's check the browser console. As you can see, we're getting error, React is not defined. So whenever you're using Create React App or Vue.js, the configuration for the optional React import is already added. We need to do the same configuration for Webpack also. So inside the Webpack config file, we need to add a plugins property. And we will import the Webpack package, which we have already installed. Now, we will use new Webpack.provide plugin. And for that function, we will pass an object with React as the key and value. First letter of key should be capital. Now, with this configuration, we don't need to manually import React package in any of the component file. So, if we run the build script again, we will not get any error in the browser console also. Now, let's go to Code Sandbox and select Vue.js template. I will select React with Vue plus TypeScript. This is the default code for Vue plus React project using TypeScript. And if you check the app.tsx file from the src folder, you will see that there is no React import added in the file, because the application is using version 18 of React. So the configuration for optional React import is mentioned in the vue.config.ts file. As you can see, we're adding React plugin in the plugins array. Let me remove the React plugin and let's open the application in New tab. If we check the console, you can see that we're getting the same error or missing React. If I add the plugin back, we will not get that error. So we're doing the same thing in our Webpack configuration also. So let's save the file now. As you can see that there is no error. And if I remove it again, you will see error back in the console. Until now, we were using Live Server to automatically reload the page once the content from the bundle.js file included in the index.html file changes. But using Live Server in production is not recommended as it's heavy. So Webpack provides its own server known as Webpack Dev Server. So we can install that using npm install webpack-dev-server command. This is the Webpack website. If you want to learn more about any configuration, you can just navigate to this website. Click on Documentation, and then click on the Configuration menu. Now, click on the Dev Server submenu. So using this configuration, you can specify the port for your application and also specify which directory can be used for the serving the static assets. Now, in the package.json file, let's change the build command to not watch anymore. And we will add new start script. And for the value, we will provide Webpack serve. Executing Webpack serve command internally executes Webpack dev server. Now, we can execute npm run start command to start the application. As you can see, the application is started on default port of 8080. We can also specify another port like 9000 as shown in the documentation. Now, let's access the application on localhost :8080. You can see, it still works. If I change the title of the application, you will see it reflected immediately. So the dev server runs on port 8080, but we can configure it to run on another port. Let's say 5000. Now, if we restart the application, it will start on port 5000. And if we access it, it will load correctly. Now, we will see how to use routing with Webpack. So to save time, I have pre-written a simple routing code in the app.js file. In the app component, I have declared 3 routes, namely /, /profile, and /about and their corresponding components. And those components are defined as can be seen here. Now, to use routing, let's install the React Router DOM library using npm install react-router-DOM. And this app component I'm already rendering in using the render method. Now, if I start the application using npm start command, you can see it started on port 5000. So if I refresh the page, we can see the content of the page. So we have 3 routes: home, profile, about, and their corresponding components gets displayed when accessing those routes. But there is one issue. If I refresh the page, you can see we get an error, cannot get /about. We're getting error because when we access any URL in the browser, the request first goes to the server. In our case, it's Webpack dev server. But we don't have any such route to handle to request. We get the same error if we refresh the /profile route also. To fix this issue, we just need to add one configuration. Inside the dev server property, we need to add history API fallback property with value of true. You have to type the property name as it is because A and F should be capital here. Otherwise, it will not work. With this configuration, Webpack will send back the index.html file when there is no matching route. Index.html contains our React application. So if we have that route, the corresponding component will be displayed. So, if I refresh the page, we don't get any error as you can see here. In the next part of this video, we will see how to optimize React application for production, how to deploy it production, and also how to create separate Webpack configuration for development and production environment. If you found this video useful, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends.